guys, we're here today to do our September wrap-up. Each of us had a very great reading month and we are so excited to talk about some books with you. So let's get into it.
So the first book I'm going to talk about is Release by Patrick Ness. Now, in my mind, Patrick Ness can really do no wrong. This is the 8th novel by him that I've read, and I've loved every single one of them, but I think this might be my new favorite. So in this book, we follow a boy named Adam, and we explore his life growing up in small-town America, living with an ultra-religious family, and his kind of experiences with exploring his sexuality and hiding that from his family. It is just honestly a beautiful and poignant story that I could not get enough of. It's quite short, and I read it in maybe 2.5 hours, and I think if you pick this up, you'll fly through it as well. Kind of went into this book expecting Adam to be an unlikable character, but by the end of this book, I was absolutely in love with him. I think he's one of Patrick Ness's strongest characters ever, and I would love to read more from his story. Reading about Adam's relationships in this story as a gay boy is so touching and just really powerful. I got so much out of this. I'm still thinking about it to this day, and I would love to reread it very soon. If you haven't picked up Release yet, I definitely recommend it. I think it's going to be one of my top lists of the year.
My first book this month is This One Summer by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki. This is a graphic novel. I actually thought that it was a memoir, but it turns out I was totally wrong on that. The main character is named Rose. I believe she's about 14 years old, and it's the story of her summer. So her family's been going to this cabin in, I believe, in Ontario in Canada since she can remember. They've been going to the same place every summer. She has a friend named Wendy up there that's her summertime friend. She's about 1.5 years younger than her, and they've always just spent their entire summers together. But this one summer is just a little bit different. Her parents have been fighting a lot. She's becoming a teenager, sort of emotions are changing. Just this really great coming of age story. The way it's written and illustrated, it really like draws the time out in a really beautiful way that I enjoyed. You get a real good insight into the moodiness of being a teenager, not feeling understood, and not quite knowing why things don't feel the way they always have anymore. I sat down with this book and devoured it in one sitting. I didn't mean to, but it just happened. It just all unfolded in front of me. I would definitely recommend this for anyone 13 or 14 and up.
The first book that I wanted to talk about is Things I'm Seeing Without You by Peter Bognani. This is a contemporary novel about a girl named Tess who's recently dropped out of high school because she's having a very difficult time dealing with the death of her boyfriend Jonah. Tess then begins working for her father's eccentric funeral business because she's just not quite sure what to do with herself. That is until one day she receives a very mysterious message that leads her on a completely unexpected path. The story follows Tess as she tries to come to grips with grief and with her thoughts on life and death. So I picked up this book because I was looking for a story about grief that wasn't completely devastating. And while this book does deal with some very tragic things like suicide, it's also very, very funny, which was a bit unexpected, and I really appreciated that. This book was absolutely what I needed at the time, and I'm really happy that I read it. It comes out pretty soon on October 3rd.
Next I have something a bit different, and that is Harry, A History by Melissa Anelli. Now this is actually a non-fiction novel all about the Harry Potter fandom, and I wasn't expecting to get too much from this book, but holy man did it make me cry. Melissa Anelli was the webmistress of a very popular Harry Potter fan site called The Leaky Cauldron, and if you were into the Harry Potter fandom kind of in the early days, like early 2000s, I think this book is like really gonna hit home for you. I, for one, as a kid, was Harry Potter obsessed, even more so than I am now. I would just reread the first 4 books constantly until the 5th one would come out, and I would spend all my time on our dial-up internet looking at sites like The Leaky Cauldron and MuggleNet. I actually pretty much cried the entire way through this, and not from the sadness, but it was just reading the stories of these people who are so passionately into Harry Potter really just strikes home with me, and how much that this fandom has really changed people's lives. Like, this book, pretty much every chapter, like, I cried when they were talking about Wizard Rock. If Harry Potter has a special place in your heart and you want to learn more about the fandom, this book is phenomenal. Melissa's voice is wonderful. There is actually lots of interviews with J.K. Rowling and stuff that she has done in her life, and it's just an incredibly fascinating look at a fandom that has changed the lives of millions.
Next up, I have another graphic novel, Ghosts by Raina Telgemeier. This one is for a middle grade audience. This book follows the main character Katrina and her family. They have moved to a town in Northern California because her little sister Maya has cystic fibrosis, and the weather helps with her lungs up there. So Kat is about 11 years old and Maya is around 8. And while Maya is the one with the genetic disease that technically could be holding her back in life, it's actually Kat who is incredibly protective over her little sister and worries a lot, and is not crazy about their new hometown. Part of the reason she's not crazy about their new hometown is that there are ghosts everywhere, like actual ghosts, which she does not believe at first. She thinks it's just a story that her new neighbor is telling her. But there are ghosts. Turns out they love living in the coastal area. So as Kat and Maya get to know these ghosts a little bit better and understand what's going on in this town, Kat sort of learns to deal better with her fear and live her life a little bit more like Maya is. There's also a lot of cool stuff about Dia de los Muertos in here that Raina Telgemeier has illustrated in a really great way. It's a great family story with some really cool cultural history, and I recommend it for anybody 8 and up.
And next up, I wanted to talk about Devils and Thieves by Jennifer Rush. And this is a very fun urban fantasy book all about motorcycle gangs that are magic. So it takes place in our world, but it centers around a whole bunch of different motorcycle gangs, and all of the members of which have their own unique special magic abilities. She's always felt like her magic is more of a burden than anything else, and she's also hiding a secret from all of the other members of her gang. So the story really kicks off when a bunch of different motorcycle gangs all come together for an annual festival, and there's a rumor spreading that someone is practicing dangerous, forbidden magic. While this book does have some very common YA tropes, it was just such a fun, unique concept that I really didn't mind, and I just absolutely loved my time reading it. And this book also comes out on October 3rd.
The last book I'm going to talk about is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Now, I love Adam's writing. His first 2 books are so special to me. History Is All You Left Me is probably one of the most impactful books I've read in my entire life. But this book definitely was not a letdown. It's phenomenal. This book is set in a world that's very similar to our own, except that there is a company in it called Deathcast, and they will call you on the day that you're going to die. After you've received this call that you're going to die, and nobody can cheat the call. If you get the call from Deathcast, you are going to die, no exceptions, but you don't know how. Once you've received the call, there is an app called the Last Friend app, and on it you can connect with other people who are also going to die that day. So in this book we follow Rufus and Mateo, who are 2 very different teenage boys in New York City, and they end up meeting through using this app. It's an incredibly touching story all about finding friends when you need them, and found family, and falling in love in the right moments. And I just loved every single page of this, and I'm so proud of Adam for having this one debut at number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. If you haven't read any Adam Silvera yet, I recommend picking up any of his books, and this one's brand new right now, so you can go check it out.
And finally, my last book this month is David Sedaris' Theft by Finding, Diaries 1977 to 2002. Full disclosure, I actually have a few years left to read in this, but they go by incredibly quickly. As I've mentioned before, David Sedaris is one of my all-time favorite writers, but normally he does longer form personal essays, and in this, it's him revisiting his meticulous journals and diaries from 1977 forward. He writes almost every day, and he culled through his own entries and pulled out the best ones, and it's just this really great snapshot into somebody that I already loved, and it's funny and dark and sad and touching, and I just love it. Definitely some more mature content in here, so I would say 15 and up, depending on what you're already reading. It is an adult book, but very cool insight into a very cool man.
I also wanted to talk about The Sky and the Deep by Adrian Young, and this is a high fantasy novel all about Vikings. So this story follows a very fierce warrior named Island, who is a member of the tribe called the Aska. The story starts out with Island being near death on the battlefield and her brother saving her life. The only problem is, she's known her brother to be dead for many years, and now she sees him fighting alongside her enemies. Did she really see her brother, or was she just seeing his spirit? This question leads Island on a very epic journey of self-discovery. I pretty much binge read this in one sitting. I'd never read a story about Vikings before, and I absolutely loved it. This book was brutal and full of violence, but ultimately it's a story about family. This book doesn't come out until 2018, but I definitely recommend keeping it on your radar.
Alright, so that was just some of the awesome books that we read in September. Let us know some of the books that you read and enjoyed in the comments down below. As per usual, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome. Bye!
Bye!
Okay.
We're rolling.
Professional.